Dr. Sarah never expected her biggest challenge, as Earth's first would be explaining human reproduction to a 7-foot-tall crystalline being who insisted on doing laundry at 3 a.m. 447, or, as Sarah had nicknamed him, stood in her kitchen holding a pregnancy test like it might explode. His translucent blue form shimmered with confusion, the bioluminescent patterns across his chest pulsing in rapid orange bursts that Sarah had learned meant deeply troubled. "Sarah, friend," his voice resonated through his crystal-like body, creating harmonics that made her coffee mug vibrate. "I have discovered this strange device in your waste receptacle. My analysis indicates it contains traces of human genetic material, but I cannot comprehend its purpose." Sarah nearly choked on her morning coffee. She'd been roommates with the crystalline ambassador for 6 months now, ever since the Intergalactic Housing Authority had paired them up in Earth's first cohabitation program. In that time, she'd explained everything from why humans needed to eat multiple times per day to why they insisted on covering their bodies with fabric. But this conversation was going to be different. "Oh, that," Sarah said, trying to buy time. "That belongs to my neighbor, Jennifer. She asked me to help her with something." His form brightened literally. When he was curious, his entire body glowed like a blue lead Christmas tree. "Help with what purpose, Sarah, friend? My scanners detect elevated hormone levels in this device. Is Jennifer neighbor experiencing illness?" Sarah had always been terrible at lying, and species had evolved the ability to detect stress pheromones. There was no point in dodging the question. "No, Jennifer's pregnant. She's going to have a baby." The light patterns on his chest shifted to deep purple. What Sarah had learned was his equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "Baby," his harmonic voice dropped an octave. "You mean she is preparing to divide? Will she require assistance with cellular mitosis?" "No, no," Sarah laughed despite herself. "Humans don't reproduce by dividing like your species does. We have a completely different process." Set the pregnancy test down carefully and moved closer, his crystalline feet making soft, tinkling sounds on the kitchen tiles. When he was very interested in something, he had a habit of unconsciously adjusting his height to match whoever he was talking to, which meant he was now crouched down to Sarah's eye level, looking like a concerned blue giant. Different process, but all intelligent life forms reproduce through division and reformation. It is universal law. How else could consciousness transfer to offspring? Sarah realized she was about to blow her alien roommate's mind, and not in a good way. "Well, humans reproduce sexually. We need 2 individuals, usually a male and female, who contribute genetic material to create a new organism." His entire form went completely transparent for a moment, which Sarah had never seen before. It was either fascination or horror. "2 individuals," his voice cracked, creating a sound like breaking glass. "You mean humans cannot reproduce alone? They require assistance from another of their species." "That's right, and the baby grows inside the female's body for about 9 months before it's born." Now's transparency was definitely horror. His form began shifting between deep red and purple, colors Sarah associated with distress and confusion. "Inside the body, as a parasite." "No, not a parasite, it's complicated." Stood up abruptly, his full 7-foot height making him tower over Sarah again. He began packing around the kitchen, leaving small scratches in the linoleum with his crystal feet, a habit he'd developed when processing difficult information. "This explains so much about human behavior," he muttered, his voice creating tiny echoes. "The pair bonding rituals I've observed, the complex social structures, the emotional attachments that seem to serve no logical purpose." "Hey," Sarah protested, "our emotional attachments serve plenty of logical purposes." "Do they? In crystalline society, we form temporary alliances for resource sharing and knowledge exchange. When we reproduce, we simply split our consciousness and reform as 2 individuals. Clean, efficient, no emotional trauma." Sarah watched her roommate pace and realized this conversation was spiraling somewhere she hadn't expected. Had always seemed so confident, so sure of his place in the universe. But now he looked genuinely shaken. "Emotional trauma. Sarah, friend, if humans require another individual to reproduce, then you are essentially incomplete beings. You are biologically dependent on forming connections with others of your species. This must create incredible psychological pressure." Sarah blinked. She'd never thought about it that way. I suppose, but we don't really see it as being incomplete. We see it as sharing, creating something together that neither person could create alone. Stopped packing and stared at her with his large, multifaceted eyes. But what if the other individual refuses to share their genetic material? What if they change their mind? What if they die? The questions hit Sarah harder than she expected. Her own recent breakup with David suddenly felt more significant in the context of explaining it to someone who literally couldn't understand the concept of needing another person. Well, then you adapt. You find someone else, or you choose not to reproduce, or you use technology to help. Humans are pretty good at adapting. Adapting, repeated slowly. You mean you continue to exist even when your biological imperatives are not fulfilled? Of course we do. Not every human reproduces, and that's okay. We find other ways to create meaning in our lives. His crystal form began to shift to a color Sarah had never seen before, a soft, swirling silver that seemed almost thoughtful. This is why humans create art, he said suddenly. And music, and literature. You are constantly creating things because your biology has trained you to be collaborative creators. Sarah felt a little thrill at seeing make these connections. I never thought about it like that, but maybe you're right. And this is why humans form what you call friendships, even with individuals they do not wish to reproduce with. You are practicing the collaborative behavior that your biology requires. That's actually a pretty interesting theory. But wasn't done. His packing had resumed, and now his color was shifting rapidly between silver and blue, excitement mixed with confusion. But Sarah, friend, this creates a paradox. If humans require collaboration to reproduce, and collaboration requires trust, and trust requires emotional bonds, then human reproduction is not just biological, it is also emotional and psychological. Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, that's exactly right. For most humans, reproduction isn't just about creating offspring. It's about building relationships, sharing experiences, creating families. Stopped packing again and looked directly at her. This means that when humans choose not to reproduce with someone, they are not just declining to share genetic material. They are rejecting a complete life partnership. The weight of that statement hung in the air. Sarah thought about David again, about their breakup, about how he'd said he wasn't ready for that level of commitment. At the time, it had felt like he was rejecting their relationship. Now, through alien perspective, she realized he'd been rejecting something much more fundamental. Yeah, she said quietly, I guess that's true. And when humans do choose to reproduce together, they are making a commitment that extends far beyond the biological act. They are agreeing to share their lives, their resources, their emotional energy, their time. For about 18 years minimum, Sarah added, often much longer. His form went completely still. Even his usual soft humming stopped. 18 years? Well, human children can't take care of themselves when they're born. They need years of care and education before they can survive independently. How many years? Legally, 18. Practically, some would argue it's more like 25 these days. Silence stretched on for so long that Sarah started to worry she'd broken him. His form had gone completely clear, except for a faint silver glow at his center. Are you okay? Sarah, friend, he said finally, human reproduction is not just biological collaboration. It is the most complex social contract I have ever encountered. Before Sarah could respond, his form suddenly blazed with bright yellow light, pure excitement. I must document this. The Crystalline Council believes humans are a simple species because your technology is relatively primitive. But this reproductive system suggests a level of social complexity that surpasses our own. He rushed toward the living room, where he kept his communication equipment, then stopped and turned back to Sarah. But first, I need to understand more. How do humans choose their reproductive partners? What criteria do they use? How do they negotiate the terms of this social contract? Sarah realized she'd opened a very large can of worms. Human mating and relationships are incredibly complex topics. It would take days to explain all the cultural variations alone. Days, excitement grew even brighter. Sarah, friend, I have decades. This could be the most important research of my career. Sarah looked at her roommate, practically vibrating with scientific enthusiasm, and realized her quiet morning was officially over. Okay, she said, pouring herself another cup of coffee. But you're going to need to sit down for this, and maybe dim your glow a little, you're hurting my eyes. Of course, but Sarah friend, before we begin, I must ask, is this why you and David, previous companions, stopped? Was he unwilling to commit to the full reproductive social contract? Sarah paused with her coffee cup halfway to her lips, trust to cut straight to the heart of things. Yeah, that's exactly why. Then David, previous companion, was foolish. Any being who would reject a partnership with someone as knowledgeable and patient as you clearly does not understand the value of good collaborative potential. Sarah smiled despite herself. Leave it to her alien roommate to accidentally give her the best breakup consolation she'd heard yet. Thanks, now where do you want me to start? At the beginning, Sarah friend. How do humans first identify potential reproductive partners? Sarah settled into her favorite chair and looked at, who had dimmed to a soft blue and was watching her with the intense focus of someone about to hear the secrets of the universe. Well, she began, it usually starts with something humans call attraction. 3 hours later, Sarah had covered the basics of human dating and had filled 17 pages of notes in his crystalline data storage system. His questions had ranged from the practical, why do humans dress differently when seeking mates, to the philosophical. If humans can feel attracted to individuals they logically know would be poor reproductive partners, does this suggest that human attraction serves purposes beyond reproduction? The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah, it's Jennifer. Is this a good time? Sarah looked at, who immediately began flashing with curiosity. That's Jennifer neighbor, he whispered. The one who is currently housing developing offspring. May I observe her for scientific purposes? You can't study her like a lab specimen. Of course not, I will be subtle. Sarah opened the door to find Jennifer holding a plate of cookies and looking slightly nervous. Hi, Jennifer said. I wanted to thank you for yesterday and I was hopping. Could I ask you a few more questions? Of course, come in. Jennifer stepped into the apartment and immediately noticed, who had positioned himself in what he clearly thought was a casual pose by the window, but which actually made him look like a 7-foot-tall blue statue. Oh, hi, Jennifer said. She'd met him a few times and had gotten used to having a crystalline alien in the building. Greetings, Jennifer neighbor, replied, his voice carefully modulated to sound relaxed. I understand you are currently experiencing reproductive success. Congratulations. Jennifer blinked, thank you. Sarah shot a warning look, but he was already continuing. If you do not mind my curiosity, how did you and your reproductive partner negotiate the terms of your collaboration? Sarah said quickly, Jennifer might not want to discuss personal details. But Jennifer was already laughing. It's okay, actually that's kind of why I'm here, she looked at Sarah. Things with Mike are complicated right now, he's not handling the news well. His form brightened with interest, and Sarah could practically see him taking mental notes. Not handling the news well? Asked. Was the reproductive collaboration not intentional? No, it's fine, Jennifer said. Actually, it's kind of refreshing to talk to someone who doesn't automatically assume they know how I should feel about everything. She looked at. No, it wasn't planned, and Mike is freaking out about the commitment level. Ah, said, nodding sagely. He is experiencing fear about the 18 to 25-year social contract. Jennifer stared at him. That's actually exactly what's happening. How did you know that? Sarah Friend has been educating me about human reproductive behaviors. I am beginning to understand that your species treats reproduction as far more than a biological function. Most of us do, yeah. Moved closer, his scientific curiosity overriding his attempt at subtlety. May I ask, when you discovered you were carrying developing offspring, what was your primary emotional response? Jennifer considered the question seriously. Terror, she said finally, and then excitement, and then terror again. Terror about the responsibility. Terror about doing it alone. Mike and I have only been together for 8 months. We're still figuring out if we actually like each other, and now we're supposed to make decisions about raising a whole human being together. His form shifted to that thoughtful silver color again. So you are facing the possibility that your reproductive partner may withdraw from the collaboration, leaving you to fulfill the contract alone. Pretty much. This seems like a significant design flaw in the human reproductive system. Sarah and Jennifer both stared at him. I mean, continued, crystalline reproduction requires no ongoing collaboration. Once we divide, both new individuals are immediately capable of independent existence. But humans create offspring that require 2 decades of care, using a system that depends on the voluntary cooperation of 2 individuals who may not remain committed to the collaboration. When you put it like that, Jennifer said slowly, it does sound pretty crazy. It is not crazy, said quickly. It is ambitious. Humans have evolved a reproductive strategy that requires the highest levels of social cooperation I have ever encountered. The fact that your species succeeds at reproduction at all suggests remarkable social adaptability. Jennifer looked surprised. I never thought about it that way. Consider this, continued, warming to his subject. Your species produces offspring that are completely dependent on adult care for years. This means that human reproductive success depends not just on the biological health of the parents, but on their ability to maintain stable social bonds, share resources effectively, and coordinate their efforts toward long-term goals. From an evolutionary perspective, humans have essentially made social cooperation a reproductive necessity. Sarah watched Jennifer's expression change as she processed words. So when Mike says he's not ready for this, Jennifer said slowly, he's not just talking about becoming a father. He's talking about whether he can commit to being part of a cooperative social unit for the next 20 years. Precisely. And your fear is not just about raising offspring alone. It is about whether you can fulfill a social contract that was designed for 2 individuals. Jennifer sat down heavily in Sarah's other chair. That's a lot of pressure to put on an 8-month relationship. Indeed, which raises the question, said, why did you choose to enter a reproductive collaboration with my partner if your social bond was still uncertain? Jennifer looked embarrassed. We didn't exactly choose it, it just happened. Sform went completely transparent again. It happened without conscious decision-making. Sarah said gently, I haven't explained contraception yet. Contraception. Humans have developed ways to engage in reproductive behaviors without actually reproducing, for pleasure, bonding, and other reasons. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very quiet. Humans engage in reproductive behaviors, for pleasure. Among other reasons, yes. And these behaviors can sometimes result in unintended reproduction. Sometimes. Sform began cycling through colors rapidly, blue, silver, red, purple, and back again. Sarah recognized this as his processing overload pattern. This means, he said slowly, that humans have biological drives that encourage reproductive behaviors, even when reproduction is not desired. That's one way to put it. And this means humans must constantly make conscious decisions about whether to reproduce, rather than simply responding to biological imperatives when reproduction is appropriate. Right again. And some humans, like Jennifer neighbor, find themselves facing reproduction when they have not yet established the social bonds necessary to support the required 20-year collaboration. Unfortunately, yes. Sat down on the floor with a crystalline thud. Human reproduction is not just complex, it is actively contradictory. Your biology encourages behaviors that can result in commitments you may not be prepared to make, with individuals you may not know well enough to trust with such collaboration. Jennifer laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Yeah, that about sums it up. How do humans cope with this contradiction? Asked. Sarah and Jennifer looked at each other. Not always well, Sarah admitted. Some people make it work, others struggle. Some relationships survive the surprise, others don't. But what guidance does your society provide? Surely humans have developed protocols for navigating these situations. We have some systems, Jennifer said. Support groups, counseling, family services, but honestly, a lot of us are just figuring it out as we go along. Sform shifted to deep purple, his most troubled color. You mean humans face the most complex reproductive challenge I have ever encountered, with minimal social support and no standardized protocols? Pretty much. And yet your species continues to successfully reproduce and raise offspring to maturity. Most of the time, yeah. His color shifted from purple to bright gold, pure amazement. Humans, he said reverently, are the most remarkable species I have ever encountered. Sarah and Jennifer exchanged glances. Because we managed to reproduce despite our messed-up system, Jennifer asked. Because you succeed at reproduction despite having evolved a system that requires constant conscious decision-making, long-term social cooperation, and emotional resilience in the face of biological contradictions. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? Jennifer was quiet for a moment. I mostly just feel scared and overwhelmed. Of course you do. You are facing a challenge that would terrify any intelligent being. But Jennifer, neighbor, you are already demonstrating the adaptive capabilities that make human reproduction possible. How do you figure? You sought advice from Sarah Friend. You are thinking carefully about your options. You are considering both your own capabilities and your partner's limitations. You are not simply responding to biological impulses. You are making conscious choices about how to proceed. Jennifer's eyes were getting a little watery when you put it like that. And if my partner proves unable to commit to the collaboration, you have other humans you can turn to for support. Your species has evolved backup systems for reproductive cooperation. Backup systems, friends, family members, community support networks. Humans rarely attempt to raise offspring in complete isolation. Your social structure provides multiple layers of cooperative relationships. Sarah found herself smiling. That's actually a really insightful way to look at it. The more I learn about human reproduction, said, the more impressed I become with your species' social evolution. You have created a system that is simultaneously the most challenging and most supportive reproductive strategy I can imagine. Jennifer wiped her eyes. I came over here feeling like a mess, and somehow talking to an alien has made me feel better about being human. You should feel proud of being human, said seriously. Your species attempts something that most intelligent life forms would consider impossible, and you succeed. Sarah looked at her roommate with new appreciation. You know, for someone who just learned about human reproduction this morning, you've got some pretty wise perspectives on it. I have had an excellent teacher, replied, his form glowing with warm blue light. But I still have many questions. Such as? Well, for example, if human reproduction is so complex, how do humans ever decide they are ready for it? What criteria do you use to determine when you have found a suitable collaborative partner? Sarah and Jennifer looked at each other again. That, Sarah said, is going to require a much longer conversation. As if on cue, there was another knock at the door. The second knock was more urgent than Jennifer's had been. Sarah opened the door to find Mike standing in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and he had the wild-eyed look of someone who had been thinking too hard for too long. Jennifer, thank God I saw you come in here. We need to talk. Jennifer's face tightened. Mike, I told you I needed space to think. I know, but I've been thinking too, and I figured some things out. Who had been quietly observing from his position by the window, suddenly brightened with interest. Sarah could practically see him taking mental notes about human mating drama in real time. Maybe this isn't the best time, Sarah suggested diplomatically. No, it's okay, Jennifer said, though her voice suggested it really wasn't. Come in, Mike. Mike stepped inside and immediately noticed. Oh, hey, 447, the crystal alien supplied helpfully. I am Jennifer Neighbor's friend Sarah's cohabitation partner. Right, the alien guy. Mike seemed too distracted to find this weird, which said something about his mental state. Mike, reproductive partner, said formally. I understand you are experiencing difficulty with commitment to collaborative offspring management. Mike blinked. I'm sorry, what? Has been learning about human reproduction, Sarah explained quickly. He's very interested in our social structures. Your social structures are fascinating, agreed. Particularly the decision-making processes involved in reproductive partnerships. Mike looked confused but pressed on. Jen, I know I've been freaking out, but I think I understand now what's been bothering me. Jennifer crossed her arms. What's that? I'm not scared of being a dad. I mean, I am, but that's not the main thing. I'm scared of us not knowing each other well enough to be good partners in this. His form brightened noticeably. Ah, you have identified the core challenge of human reproductive collaboration. Have I? Indeed, you recognize that successful offspring rearing requires not just biological compatibility, but social compatibility. This is very sophisticated thinking. Mike looked at with surprise. Thanks. But Mike, Jennifer said, we've been together 8 months. How much better can we know each other? That's just it, Mike said. I realized we've been dadding, going out, having fun, sleeping together, but we've never actually talked about the big stuff. Like, what kind of parents do we want to be? How do we handle money? What if we disagree about major decisions? Practically hummed with excitement. You are describing the necessity of negotiating collaborative parameters before beginning a long-term reproductive partnership. I guess I am, Mike said slowly. He was starting to look at with interest instead of confusion. This is precisely what I do not understand about human reproduction, continued. Your species engages in pair-bonding behaviors before establishing the social contracts necessary for successful collaboration. It seems inefficient. It does when you put it like that, Jennifer admitted. But perhaps, said thoughtfully, the pair-bonding behaviors serve as a testing period for social compatibility. Like dating is a trial run for partnership, Sarah asked. Precisely. Humans engage in low-stakes collaboration, sharing meals, leisure activities, emotional support, to evaluate whether an individual would be suitable for high-stakes collaboration like reproductive partnerships. Mike nodded slowly. That actually makes sense, but Jen and I never talked about kids or long-term stuff because we were just having fun. We weren't thinking of it as a trial run for anything serious. Which suggests, observed, that you entered reproductive behaviors before completing the evaluation period. We weren't trying to reproduce, Jennifer said. We were just engaging in reproductive behaviors for pleasure and bonding purposes, finished. Yes, Sarah Friend explained this. Your species has separated reproductive behaviors from reproductive intent. It is remarkable, but it creates the possibility of unintended reproductive collaboration. Unintended reproductive collaboration, Mike repeated. That's one way to put it. The question now, said, is whether you wish to continue the evaluation period while managing reproductive consequences, or whether you prefer to terminate the collaboration. Jennifer and Mike looked at each other. When you put it like that, Jennifer said, it sounds like we have to decide whether we want to try being actual partners or just be co-parents. Is there a difference? Mike asked. Oh yes, said immediately. Co-parents share responsibility for offspring welfare but maintain separate social structures. Full partners integrate their social structures and make collaborative decisions about all aspects of life that affect offspring welfare. How do you know so much about this? Mike asked. I thought your species reproduces by splitting in half or something. We do, but I am learning that human reproductive strategies are far more sophisticated than crystalline strategies. Your species has evolved multiple layers of social cooperation to support offspring welfare. Such as, Jennifer prompted. Well, you have pair bonding, which provides emotional support and resource sharing. You have extended family networks, which provide additional resources and assistance. You have community structures like schools and medical facilities. You have cultural systems for transmitting knowledge to offspring. And you have legal frameworks to ensure continued support if primary partnerships dissolve. Sarah stared at her roommate. You've been thinking about this all day, haven't you? It is the most complex social system I have ever encountered. Of course I have been thinking about it. Mike was looking at with something approaching awe. So you're saying humans have basically created a whole civilization around the idea of making sure kids are taken care of. That is exactly what I am saying. Your species has organized your entire society around successful reproduction and offspring management. It is unprecedented. But then why does it feel so hard? Jennifer asked. Because, said gently, you are attempting to use a system designed for planned, long-term partnerships to handle an unplanned situation. You are trying to make 20-year decisions based on 8 months of information. So what do we do? Mike asked. His form shifted to that thoughtful silver color. In crystalline society, we would gather more information before making decisions. Perhaps you could extend your evaluation period. What do you mean? Well, you now know you will be co-parents regardless of whether you choose to be full partners. This removes the time pressure for decision-making. You could use the next several months to evaluate your compatibility for long-term partnership while also preparing for co-parenting responsibilities. Jennifer and Mike looked at each other thoughtfully. So like dating with a specific goal, Jennifer said. Dating with explicit evaluation criteria, corrected. You could discuss your expectations for partnership, your approaches to child-rearing, your financial priorities, your communication styles. You could practice collaborative decision-making on smaller issues to see how well you work together. And if we decide we're not compatible as full partners, Mike asked, then you focus on developing an effective co-parenting collaboration instead. Many humans successfully raise offspring in this arrangement. Sarah found herself impressed with his practical approach. That's actually really good advice. But it requires both parties to commit to honest evaluation, added. You cannot use this time to try to convince each other to choose partnership. You must genuinely assess compatibility. Mike nodded slowly. I think I'd like to try that, Jen. What do you think? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. I think it sounds scary but smart, like what if we find out we're not compatible? Then you find out before you make a 20-year commitment, said simply. Better to discover incompatibility during evaluation than after full partnership begins. And what if we find out we are compatible? Mike asked. Then you can choose partnership with confidence instead of fear. Jennifer smiled for the first time since Mike had arrived. I like that better than just hoping for the best. So we're going to intentionally figure out if we want to be partners, Mike asked. We're going to intentionally figure out if we can be good partners, Jennifer corrected. His form glowed with warm blue light. This is an excellent example of human adaptive problem-solving. You have taken an unplanned situation and created a structured approach for managing it. It's still going to be scary, Mike said. Of course it is, Sarah said. You're making decisions about your entire future, but you're making them together with good information instead of just reacting to fear. And added, you have social support structures to help you. You are not attempting this collaboration in isolation. Jennifer looked around the room at Sarah and Mike. You know, this morning I felt like my life was falling apart. Now I feel like, maybe it's just changing in a way I wasn't prepared for. Change is challenging for all species, said, but humans appear to be exceptionally good at adapting to unexpected change. How can you tell? Mike asked. Your species has colonized an entire planet despite having reproductive and social systems that should make large-scale cooperation impossible. Yet humans regularly collaborate in groups of millions. You have created technologies that extend beyond any individuals. You have built societies that support not just your own offspring, but the offspring of complete strangers. Sarah felt a little thrill of pride at its assessment of humanity. When you put it like that, Jennifer said, figuring out how to raise one baby seems more manageable. Exactly. You are part of a species that has already solved the fundamental challenges of collaborative reproduction. You simply need to apply those solutions to your specific situation. Mike looked at Jennifer. So, want to go get coffee and start figuring out if we can be good partners? I'd like that, Jennifer said, but I want to make some ground rules first. Such as complete honesty. No trying to give answers we think the other person wants to hear. And if we decide we're better as co-parents than partners, we don't treat it like failure. Agreed, Mike said immediately. And I want to add we check in with each other regularly about how the evaluation is going. No bottling up concerns. Practically vibrated with approval. Excellent collaborative protocol establishment. Jennifer and Mike headed toward the door, looking more relaxed than either of them had when they'd arrived. Thanks for letting us work this out in your living room, Jennifer said to Sarah. And thank you, Mike added. I never thought I'd get relationship advice from an alien, but it really helped. You are most welcome, Mike, reproductive partner. I found your decision-making process quite educational. After they left, Sarah collapsed back into her chair. That was intense. That was fascinating, corrected. I observed a real-time example of human adaptive problem-solving under pressure. Is that what you call it? Sarah friend, in the space of one conversation, Jennifer neighbor and Mike partner identified their primary challenge, evaluated their options, established collaborative protocols, and committed to a structured evaluation process. This is sophisticated crisis management. Sarah thought about it. I guess it is when you put it like that. It also demonstrates something interesting about human reproduction that I had not considered. What's that? Your species treats reproductive partnerships as ongoing negotiations rather than fixed contracts. Even after reproduction has occurred, humans continue to evaluate and adjust their collaborative arrangements. You mean like how some people get divorced, or how co-parenting arrangements evolve over time? Exactly. Crystalline reproduction is permanent. Once we divide, the process is complete. But human reproduction begins a decades-long collaborative project that requires constant adaptation and decision-making. Sarah had never thought about parenting as a decades-long collaborative project, but it made sense. So human reproduction isn't just biologically complex, she said slowly. It's socially dynamic. Precisely, and this explains why your species has developed such sophisticated social and emotional capabilities. You need them for reproductive success. Meaning, think about the skills Jennifer Neighbor and Mike Partner just demonstrated. They communicated complex emotions, negotiated conflicting priorities, established mutual agreements, and committed to ongoing evaluation and adjustment. These are advanced collaboration skills. And you think humans evolved these skills because we need them for reproduction. I think humans evolved these skills because your reproductive strategy made them necessary for survival. A species that produces helpless offspring requiring 20 years of care must be exceptionally good at social cooperation, or it goes extinct. Sarah felt another little thrill of species pride. So you're saying humans are naturally good at collaboration because we had to be. I am saying humans are naturally good at collaboration despite having biological drives that often conflict with collaborative behavior. This is extraordinary. What do you mean about conflicting drives? Settled into his favorite thinking position, crouched at Sarah's eye level. Consider this. Humans have biological drives for individual survival, mate competition, resource acquisition, and status achievement. All of these drives encourage behavior that could interfere with collaboration. Okay, but successful human reproduction requires suppressing these individual drives in favor of collaborative ones. Parents must share resources with offspring and partners. They must cooperate rather than compete. They must prioritize group welfare over individual advantage. Sarah nodded slowly, and we do this even when it's difficult. You do this even when it conflicts with other biological impulses. This suggests that human social evolution has actually aspects of human biological evolution. Meaning what exactly? Meaning humans have culturally evolved beyond their biological programming. You have created social systems that make you better at collaboration than your biology alone would predict. Sarah stared at her roommate. Are you saying you think humans are more evolved than other species? I am saying humans have achieved something that most species, including mine, have not achieved. You have conscious control over your biological impulses in service of collaborative goals. But lots of species cooperate. What about ants or bees? Ants and bees cooperate through biological programming. They cannot choose not to cooperate. Humans cooperate through conscious decision-making, even when cooperation conflicts with other desires. Sarah thought about Jennifer and Mike choosing to work together despite their fears and uncertainties. So you think the fact that human cooperation is voluntary makes it more impressive? I think the fact that human cooperation is voluntary makes it more flexible, more adaptable, and more powerful than any other form of cooperation I have encountered. Before Sarah could respond, there was a soft chiming sound from communication equipment. Ah, said brightening, the council is requesting my daily report. What are you going to tell them? His form shifted through several colors as he considered the question. I believe I will tell them that Earth humans are far more sophisticated than our initial assessments indicated. Really? Sarah friend, when the Crystalline Council first made contact with Earth, we assumed humans were a primitive species because your technology is relatively basic compared to ours. We thought we were dealing with simple beings who had accidentally achieved space communication. And now I believe we were completely wrong. Human technology may be basic, but human social technology is the most advanced I have ever encountered. Sarah felt a warm glow of pride. Thanks, that means a lot. It is simply an objective assessment. But Sarah friend, I have a question that has been troubling me. What's that? His form shifted to a troubled purple. If human reproduction is as complex and challenging as I now understand it to be, why do humans continue to choose it? The question caught Sarah off guard. What do you mean? You have explained that human reproduction requires finding compatible partners, negotiating complex social contracts, sharing resources for decades, and managing the constant possibility of collaboration failure. You have also explained that humans can engage in reproductive behaviors without reproducing, and that many humans choose not to reproduce at all. Right. So why do humans like Jennifer Neighbor and Mike Partner choose to proceed with reproduction when they could choose not to? What motivates humans to accept such complexity and risk? Sarah realized she was about to try explaining something she wasn't sure she understood herself. I think, she said slowly, it's because humans find meaning in creating and nurturing life, even when it's difficult. But meaning is subjective. Different humans could find meaning in other activities that involve less risk and complexity. Sure, and many do. But there's something special about creating a person who never existed before and watching them grow and learn and become their own individual. His color shifted to thoughtful silver. You mean humans find value in the creative aspect of reproduction? Partly, but also the collaborative aspect. Raising a child with someone you love, watching them figure out the world together, building a family unit that's unique to your specific partnership. Ah, said suddenly. Humans find reproduction meaningful because it combines your two greatest capabilities, creation and collaboration. Maybe, I've never really thought about it that way. And the difficulty is part of what makes it meaningful, because achieving something complex and challenging is more satisfying than achieving something simple. Sarah thought about Jennifer and Mike, working through their fears to figure out how to be partners. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Easy things don't usually feel as significant. This explains so much about human behavior, mused. Your species actively seeks out challenges that require collaboration and creativity, not just reproduction, but art, science, exploration, problem-solving. You think it's all connected. I think humans have evolved to find meaning in collaborative creation, and reproduction is simply the most fundamental expression of that drive. Sarah felt like they were getting close to understanding something important about humanity that she'd never articulated before. So when humans choose to reproduce, she said slowly, we're not just creating offspring. We're expressing our deepest values about collaboration and creativity and meaning-making. Precisely. And this is why reproductive decisions are so emotionally significant for humans. You are not just making biological choices. You are making statements about what kind of life you want to live and what kind of person you want to be. And why it's so hard when reproductive partnerships fail. Indeed, failed reproductive partnerships represent not just practical difficulties, but challenges to core human values and identity. Sarah thought about her breakup with David again, and suddenly understood why it had felt so devastating even though they'd never explicitly talked about children. She said quietly, I think you've helped me understand something about myself that I didn't know I needed to understand. What is that, Sarah friend? When David said he wasn't ready for commitment, I felt rejected as a person, not just as a girlfriend. Now I think I know why. On some level, I interpreted his rejection as a statement that I wasn't worthy of the kind of collaborative, creative partnership that represents the best of what humans can be together. His form glowed with gentle blue light. And that interpretation caused you pain because collaborative, creative partnership is central to human meaning-making. Yes, exactly. But Sarah friend, David previous partner's inability to commit to such partnership reflects his limitations, not your worthiness. I know that intellectually, but emotionally. Emotionally, you experienced rejection of your fundamental human values. This would be painful for any human. Sarah felt some of the lingering hurt from her breakup finally start to ease. Thank you, that really helps. You are welcome, but Sarah friend, this conversation has raised new questions for me. Such as, if reproductive partnerships represent the highest form of human collaboration, and if such partnerships sometimes fail, how do humans cope with the emotional consequences? And how do humans maintain hope that they can achieve such partnerships in the future? Sarah looked at her alien roommate, who had spent the day learning about the most complex aspects of human existence, and realized he was asking her how humans deal with heartbreak and maintain faith in love. That, she said, might require another pot of coffee. His form brightened with enthusiasm. I will dim my luminescence so you can think clearly. As Sarah headed to the kitchen to start another pot of coffee, she reflected on how strange it was that an alien's curiosity about human reproduction had turned into the most insightful conversation about relationships and meaning she'd had in years. And they still had a whole third day of questions ahead of them. Sarah woke up the next morning to the smell of something burning and the sound of making distressed harmonic frequencies in the kitchen. She stumbled out of bed to find her 7-foot crystalline roommate standing over the stove, poking suspiciously at what appeared to be the remains of scrambled eggs. "What are you doing?" "I am attempting to prepare nutritional sustenance for Jennifer neighbor," he said, his form flickering between embarrassed orange and determined blue. "She is carrying developing offspring and requires additional protein for proper cellular construction." Sarah looked at the charred mess in the pan. "That's really sweet of you, but maybe we should order takeout instead." "I do not understand how humans manage to transform simple ingredients into edible combinations. The chemical processes seem straightforward, but the application is extremely difficult." "Cooking takes practice," Sarah said, gently moving away from the stove. "Why are you making breakfast for Jennifer?" "She and Mike Partner are coming to discuss their evaluation protocol. I thought nutritional support would be appropriate." Before Sarah could ask what evaluation protocol he was talking about, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Jennifer and Mike standing in the hallway, both holding notebooks and looking unusually serious. "Good morning," Jennifer said. "Is ready for our consultation." "Consultation?" "He offered to help us develop criteria for evaluating our partnership compatibility," Mike explained. "We figured an outside perspective might be useful." Sarah looked back at, who was practically glowing with scientific enthusiasm. "You offered to be their relationship counselor." "I offered to apply systematic analysis to their collaborative assessment process," corrected. "It is quite different from counseling. I am not qualified to provide emotional guidance, but I can help them develop logical frameworks for decision-making." Jennifer and Mike came in and settled at Sarah's kitchen table. Immediately joined them, his notebook-equivalent crystal storage system ready. "So," Jennifer said, "we spent yesterday evening talking, and we realized we don't really know how to evaluate whether we'd be good long-term partners." "We know we like each other," Mike added, "and we work well together in some ways, but we've never faced any real challenges together, so we don't know how we'd handle the hard stuff." "Ah," said brightening, "you need to develop testing scenarios." "Testing scenarios?" "In crystalline society, when we consider temporary alliances for resource sharing or knowledge exchange, we establish specific situations that will reveal compatibility or incompatibility. You could do something similar." Sarah poured coffee for everyone and set out a bowl of the crystalline mineral supplements that absorbed for energy and sat down to listen. "What kind of testing scenarios?" Jennifer asked. "Well, consider what challenges you will face as reproductive partners. Financial decisions, responsibilities, household management, communication under stress, conflict resolution, decision-making about the child's welfare." Mike started taking notes, "So we could practice dealing with those things before the baby arrives." "Precisely, but also practice dealing with situations that will test your collaborative compatibility more generally." "Such as," Jennifer prompted. His form shifted to that thoughtful silver color. "Perhaps you could practice making a major purchase together, or planning an event that requires coordination and compromise, or caring for something that depends on you both." "Like getting a pet," Mike suggested. "Or planning a weekend trip," Jennifer added. "Something that requires budgeting and scheduling and dealing with problems if things go wrong." "Excellent examples," agreed. "But I would suggest starting with smaller challenges and building up to larger ones." Sarah found herself impressed with his practical approach. "That actually sounds like good advice for any couple." "The key," continued, "is to observe not just whether you achieve your goals, but how you work together to achieve them. Do you communicate clearly? Do you handle stress well as a team? Do you support each other or compete with each other? Jennifer looked thoughtful. And if we discover we don't work well together? Then you focus on developing an effective co-parenting collaboration instead of a full partnership. But how is co-parenting different from partnership? Mike asked. His form brightened. This was clearly a question he'd been hoping someone would ask. Full partners integrate their lives and make collaborative decisions about all aspects of their shared existence. Co-parents maintain separate lives but coordinate specifically around child welfare. Different collaborative strategies for different goals. Can you give us examples? Jennifer asked. Certainly, full partners might share finances, living space, long-term planning, and emotional support. They make decisions together about careers, major purchases, social activities, and life goals. Their individual choices are always considered in context of their partnership impact. Sarah nodded, like how married couples operate. Exactly. Co-parents, however, maintain financial independence, separate living situations, and individual decision-making about personal matters. They collaborate specifically on child-related decisions like education, healthcare, discipline, and scheduling. Mike was scribbling notes rapidly. So co-parenting is more like business partnership around the kid. That is an oversimplification, but not inaccurate. Co-parents can maintain friendship and mutual respect without romantic partnership. Many humans successfully raise offspring this way. Jennifer looked relieved. So if we decide we're not compatible as full partners, it doesn't mean we've failed as co-parents. Correct. Different types of collaboration require different skills and compatibility factors. You might be excellent co-parents while being incompatible as full partners. Or vice versa, Mike asked. That is less common, admitted. Full partnership requires all the skills necessary for co-parenting, plus additional emotional and practical compatibility, but theoretically possible. Sarah was taking mental notes herself. Systematic approach to human relationships was surprisingly insightful. So how do we test for co-parenting compatibility versus full partnership compatibility? Jennifer asked. By testing different types of collaboration separately, replied immediately. Practice making decisions about child-related issues specifically. Practice coordinating schedules and sharing responsibilities without sharing personal resources. See if you can maintain respect and effective communication even when you disagree about personal choices. That makes sense, Mike said slowly. Like, can we work together to research pediatricians even if we don't want to share a bank account? Precisely. Co-parenting requires collaboration on specific issues while maintaining individual autonomy in other areas. And full partnership testing. Practice integrating all aspects of your lives. Make decisions together about finances, housing, career priorities, social activities. See if you can maintain individual identity while also functioning as a collaborative unit. Jennifer and Mike exchanged glances. That sounds really intense, Jennifer said. It is intense, agreed. Which is why many humans find it challenging. Full partnership requires individuals to balance personal needs with collaborative needs constantly. But some people make it work, Mike said. Many people make it work, Sarah confirmed. My parents have been married for 35 years. They're still individuals, but they're also definitely a team. How do they balance personal needs with collaborative needs? Asked, suddenly very interested. Sarah thought about her parents. They talk a lot, they negotiate, they take turns prioritizing each other's goals, and they've learned to find personal satisfaction in collaborative achievements. Meaning, like my mom wanted to go back to school, but it meant my dad had to take on more household responsibilities, and they had to live on less income for a while. But he was proud of her achievement because he'd contributed to making it possible. His form shifted through several colors rapidly. So successful full partners find personal meaning in enabling their partner's success. Among other things, yeah. This suggests that full partnership requires not just compatibility, but also the ability to expand personal identity to include collaborative identity. Jennifer looked thoughtful. You mean like we'd have to be willing to care as much about Mike's goals as my own goals? And vice versa, Mike added. That's actually really hard. It is extremely difficult, agreed. Which is why I suggested testing scenarios. You can practice collaborative decision-making on smaller issues to see if you have the emotional flexibility required for full partnership. And if we don't, Jennifer asked, then you focus on co-parenting, which requires less emotional integration, but can still be very successful for child welfare. Sarah looked around the table at this unlikely group, her alien roommate providing relationship advice to two humans who were trying to figure out how to raise a baby together. It was surreal, but also somehow perfect. "Can I ask something?" Sarah said. "What made you think you could help with this? You don't have relationships the way humans do." "That is precisely why I can help," replied. "I have no emotional investment in their decision, so I can analyze their situation objectively. And I have observed many collaborative structures, so I can identify patterns and principles that apply across different types of partnerships." Plus, Jennifer added, he asks really good questions that force us to think clearly instead of just reacting emotionally. "Speaking of questions," Mike said, "I have one for you. How do we know when we've tested enough? Like, when do we decide we have enough information to make a decision?" Was quiet for a long moment, his form shifting through various colors. "In crystalline society," he said finally, "we continue gathering information until the optimal choice becomes clear. But I am learning that human decisions often cannot be optimized in the same way." "What do you mean?" "Human collaborative partnerships involve too many variables and too much change over time for optimization. You cannot gather enough information to guarantee success. At some point, you must accept uncertainty and make decisions based on probability and preference." Jennifer nodded slowly. "So we can't test our way to certainty." "No, but you can test your way to confidence. You can gather enough information to make informed decisions about what kind of collaboration you want to attempt." "And then we just hope for the best?" Mike asked. "Then you commit to making your chosen collaboration work as well as possible, while remaining flexible enough to adapt if circumstances change." Sarah felt like she was watching discover something important about the nature of human relationships. "You know," she said, "that's actually pretty profound advice for anyone making relationship decisions." "It is simply logical analysis," replied. "But I am beginning to understand that human logic is different from crystalline logic." "How so?" "Crystalline logic seeks optimal solutions. Human logic seeks satisfactory solutions that can be adapted over time. This allows humans to make decisions despite incomplete information." "Is that why humans are so adaptable?" Jennifer asked. "I believe so. Your species has learned to make decisions based on partial information, then adjust those decisions as new information becomes available. This allows much more flexibility than optimization-based decision-making." Mike looked impressed. "So you're saying humans are basically evolved to be good at making the best decisions we can with what we know, and then changing course if we need to?" "Precisely. And this is particularly important for reproductive partnerships, because the circumstances and individuals involved will change significantly over the span of 20 years. "Meaning we can't predict how we'll grow and change as people?" Jennifer asked. "Meaning you can choose to grow and change in compatible directions, but only if you maintain open communication and willingness to adapt." Sarah felt another one of those moments where alien perspective illuminated something about humanity that she'd never clearly seen before. "So successful long-term partnerships aren't just about finding the right person," she said slowly. "They're about both people committing to keep choosing each other as they change." "That is my understanding, yes. Human partnerships are not fixed contracts but ongoing collaborative projects." Jennifer and Mike looked at each other. "That's actually really comforting," Jennifer said. "It means we don't have to figure everything out perfectly right now. We just have to figure out if we want to try figuring it out together," Mike added. "And if you discover you want to try different approaches to collaboration, you can adjust your arrangement," said. "Human partnerships appear to be remarkably flexible." "Speaking of which," Jennifer said, "Mike and I talked last night and we want to try the testing approach. But we want to test both co-parenting compatibility and full partnership compatibility." "Simultaneously?" asked. "Sequentially. We figured we should start with co-parenting compatibility since we're definitely going to be co-parents. Then if that works well, we can test full partnership compatibility." "That is an excellent strategic approach," approved. Co-parenting skills are necessary for full partnership anyway, so you can build from one to the other. And if co-parenting doesn't work well, Mike asked, then you know to focus on developing separate approaches to child welfare rather than collaborative approaches. Sarah was impressed with how thoughtful Jennifer and Mike were being about their situation. What kind of co-parenting tests are you planning? She asked. Well, Jennifer said, we're going to practice researching and making decisions about baby-related stuff together, like picking a pediatrician, choosing researching car seats and cribs. And we're going to practice scheduling and coordinating, Mike added, like planning doctor's appointments and figuring out work schedules and dividing up responsibilities. Most importantly, Jennifer continued, we're going to practice communicating about difficult topics without it turning into personal conflict. Brightened with approval, these are excellent testing scenarios, but may I suggest adding one more element? What's that? Practice maintaining your individual identities and personal relationships while also functioning as co-parents. This is often where co-parenting arrangements encounter difficulties. You mean like making sure we both keep our own friends and hobbies? Mike asked. And making sure we can disagree about personal choices without it affecting our co-parenting collaboration, Jennifer added. Exactly. Successful co-parents must learn to compartmentalize their collaboration. Your personal compatibility does not need to be perfect as long as your parenting compatibility is strong. Sarah found herself wondering if she'd consider a career as a relationship counselor. And if the co-parenting tests go well, Jennifer asked. Then you can begin testing full partnership compatibility, said, but that will require different scenarios. Such as financial integration, shared living space, coordinated long-term planning, emotional intimacy under stress. Mike grimaced, that sounds harder than the co-parenting stuff. It is much harder, confirmed. Full partnership requires not just coordination, but genuine integration of life goals and decision-making processes. But also potentially more rewarding, Jennifer suggested. That appears to be the human assessment, yes. Full partners report higher levels of life satisfaction and emotional support, but also higher levels of stress and complexity. So it's a trade-off, Sarah said. All human collaborative arrangements involve trade-offs, agreed. The key is choosing trade-offs that align with your individual priorities and capabilities. There was a comfortable silence as everyone absorbed this. You know, Mike said finally, when Jennifer first told me she was pregnant, I felt like my life was spinning out of control. But this conversation makes me feel like we actually have a lot of choices about how to handle this. You do have choices, said seriously. That is the most remarkable thing about human reproduction. Despite having the most complex collaborative requirements of any species I know, humans have developed multiple strategies for meeting those requirements. And the complexity is what makes it work, Jennifer asked. The complexity is what makes it adaptable. Simple systems work only under specific conditions. Complex systems can be modified to work under many different conditions. Sarah felt a deep appreciation for her species that she'd never experienced before. So humanity's messiness is actually a feature, not a bug, she said. Your messiness, as you call it, is what allows your species to thrive under conditions that would be impossible for more rigid species. Including reproduction. Especially reproduction. Crystalline reproduction is efficient but inflexible. Human reproduction is complex but infinitely adaptable. Jennifer smiled. I like that way of thinking about it. And continued, your reproductive complexity has driven the evolution of all your other remarkable capabilities. Art, music, literature, science, technology, all of these emerge from the collaborative and creative skills that human reproduction requires. Mike looked amazed. So you're saying human creativity exists because we have to figure out how to raise bobbies together? I am saying human creativity exists because your species evolved collaborative reproductive strategies that required developing advanced communication, empathy, long-term planning, and creative problem-solving capabilities. And now we use those capabilities for everything, Sarah added. Precisely, human reproduction did not just create humans, it created human civilization. The room fell quiet as everyone contemplated this perspective. Finally, Jennifer spoke up. Can I ask you something personal? Of course, Jennifer neighbor. Do you ever wish crystallines reproduce the way humans do, with all the complexity and collaboration and emotional connection? His form shifted through several colors before settling on a soft, almost wistful blue. I have been thinking about this question since yesterday, he said quietly. Crystalline reproduction is efficient and logical. When we divide, both new individuals retain all memories and capabilities of the original. There is no loss, no uncertainty, no risk. But, Sarah prompted, but there is also no growth, no surprise, no discovery. Each new crystalline individual is essentially identical to the one who divided. We gain population but not diversity of thought or experience. And human reproduction is different. Human offspring are genuinely new individuals. They combine elements from both parents but develop their own unique perspectives, capabilities, and identities. Each human child represents something that never existed before. Mike nodded slowly. So human Bobbies are actually new, while crystalline Bobbies are copies. That is a but accurate assessment, and watching humans create and nurture genuinely new individuals, it is remarkable. Do you think crystallines could learn to reproduce like humans? Jennifer asked. His form flickered with what Sarah recognized as uncertainty. I do not know if it is biologically possible, but I am beginning to think it would be, meaningful in ways that our current reproduction is not. Sarah felt a sudden surge of affection for her alien roommate. Do you think your research on human reproduction might influence crystalline society? I hope so, said. I plan to recommend that the Council establish long-term observation programs to study human collaborative strategies. Perhaps we can learn from your approaches without completely abandoning our own. Hybrid approaches, Mike suggested. Potentially, but first, we must understand human collaboration much more thoroughly. Jennifer grinned. Well, you'll have plenty of opportunities to observe. Mike and I are going to be practicing collaboration for the next several months. And you are willing to allow me to observe your evaluation process? Asked hopefully. Are you kidding? Mike laughed. You've been the most helpful relationship counselor we've ever talked to. Plus, Jennifer added, if we're going to figure out how to raise a human baby, having an outside perspective on human behavior might be really useful. Sarah looked around the table at her unlikely little family of sorts, her crystalline roommate, her neighbor who was figuring out how to become a mother, and the man who was learning to be a father and partner. You know what, she said, I think this is going to be really interesting. Interesting? Asked. We're going to get to watch two humans build a collaborative relationship from the ground up, with advice from an alien anthropologist who thinks human reproduction is the most fascinating thing in the universe. Jennifer laughed. When you put it like that, it sounds like an adventure. All human reproduction is an adventure, observed. That is what makes it so remarkable. And terrifying, Mike added. The most worthwhile adventures usually are, Sarah said. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the maternity ward holding Jennifer and Mike's daughter, a tiny human being with Mike's eyes and Jennifer's stubborn chin, who had arrived 2 weeks early and already seemed determined to do things her own way. Stood beside her, his form glowing with soft blue wonder as he observed the baby. She is extraordinary, he said quietly, a completely unique individual who never existed before. And Jennifer and Mike? Sarah asked. Sarah looked through the window at the happy couple, who had decided 3 months into their evaluation process that they definitely wanted to try full partnership, and who had gotten married a month before the baby was born. They have successfully negotiated the most complex collaborative arrangement I have ever observed, said with deep satisfaction. And they are about to embark on the most challenging collaborative project known to any species. Raising a human being. Raising this specific human being, who will require them to adapt and grow in ways they cannot predict. Sarah smiled as she watched the baby grab onto, offered crystal finger with surprising strength. Think they'll be good at it? I think, said, they have already proven they are capable of remarkable things when they work together. The baby made a small sound and opened her eyes, looking directly at with the kind of fearless curiosity that Sarah was beginning to recognize as fundamentally human. Welcome to humanity, said softly to the baby. You are going to do amazing things. And as Sarah watched her alien roommate gently interact with the member of the most collaborative species in the galaxy, she thought about how much they had all learned about what it meant to be human, to choose love over fear, and to build something beautiful together despite uncertainty and complexity. It was, she realized, exactly what humanity did best.